This podcast contains potentially adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly sexual context. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Drinking with Authors, the podcast. I'm your host, Erica Lance. My co-host today is the amazing CR Rice. And our guest today, I'm supposed to go through the other things. I didn't bring my Post-it with me. I'm doing this from outside. What? It's okay.
That's all right.
So don't forget to like and subscribe our podcast. We really appreciate it. We're going to ping you to leave a review for us at the end. We'd prefer it's after you've been drinking along. And our sponsor today is Skunk Brothers Spirits, coupon code DWA10 on their website. There we go. I think I remembered everything. And our amazing guest today is Meredith Stoddard. Woo! Woo! Okay, let's talk about what we're drinking before I forget everything I'm supposed to do on this podcast. I am drinking.
Oh, I like your cup.
Thank you. You will get some of this swag. We have DW swag. It's all about that. Actually, we're going to be at some conventions soon that will be listed. And if you come find us, I bet you can probably talk me into giving you some swag because I like giving away free shit. So that's a whole thing. So we'll be posting soon about that. But I am drinking. What the hell am I drinking? I am drinking because it's the afternoon. So I'm drinking a little gin and tonic with pomegranate and lime. Look how fancy I'm being. Just got back. I should have. Yeah, no, I know. CR, now live up to that. Go for it.
Well, I mean, this is pestilence with a little bit of a twist. I have some blackberries I have to get rid of that didn't go into my cakes this weekend. So I have vodka, green tea, and a little bit of blackberries and the puree left over from a cake. It's really good, very sweet.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Sounds amazing. Meredith, what are you drinking?
Well, I'm in Virginia, so I have to represent Virginia wineries, and I am drinking a Chambersin. See, I'm already messing things up. From Monroe Bay Winery, which is just outside of Colonial Beach, which is a little beach town on the Potomac Estuary. And it's a really nice little winery. I actually did a writing retreat there a while back. They have like an Airbnb that's like a tiny house, and I just sort of pulled myself up in there and drank wine and worked on my next book.
Very, very cool. So for those that may not know you, what do you write?
Well, I write folklore-inspired fiction. So I am nerdy for things like microhistory and oral histories and folk songs and stuff like that. So I usually find inspiration in those things. And I have a contemporary fantasy series that is based on kind of blending Celtic and Appalachian folklore with modern life. And I also have a couple of historical fiction shorts that are based on some small bits of history around the North Carolina coast. So
There you go.
Yeah, very cool. That is awesome. So when did you kind of decide you wanted to be a writer? Like, when did that happen?
Yeah, I've always wanted to be a writer. Like I mean, my parents will tell you I made up stories before I even learned how to read. But even when I was in elementary school and middle school, I was writing stories. And so I don't have any of those old stories, but I would share them around with my friends and stuff like that and get their feedback. So I've always been writing.
That's really awesome. So when did you first publish them?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. Now that I think about it, the first novel in my fantasy series came out in 2014. The historical fiction short stories were a couple of years before that. I think that might even go back to 2011. So I've been at it for a while.
Yes, and
That's a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. Are you self or traditional? How are you published?
I am a do-it-yourself kind of gal. I really like the independence that I get with self-publishing, because I choose what genre I want to write in and how I want to do it. And sometimes I get to blend genres, which I often do. And nobody's telling me not to. So, and my readers haven't complained about it. So,
well, and I think that's one of the pluses now is more, I think it's more smaller publishers are doing it. And in, you know, the wholesale publishing world went, hi, we don't have to fit in your box. So thank you, but we're going to do it our way.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I feel like, you know, and I know you've talked to folks about this before as well. I feel like so much of the industry of the publishing industry kind of takes writers for granted. Like they know that there are a ton of us out here dreaming of writing bestsellers and stuff. So they just, you know, they don't treat writers particularly well in the publishing industry. And when I was looking at, you know, the short stories I published myself, but then when I started looking at places for this novel, I thought, you know, I was talking to agents, talking to publishers, talking to other authors, and realizing that unless you are in that sort of top 2%, you're doing it all yourself anyway, right? You're going to be responsible for your marketing. You're going to be responsible for your social media. You're going to be responsible for your image. And, you know, and they're not necessarily, and while they might provide an editor, they're not necessarily going to do a ton of marketing work and a ton of support for you. And I thought, well, if I'm doing all that work, why am I giving away most of the profits? And so I was just like, you know what? I think I'll just keep doing this myself, because the path to profitability is so much shorter for independent authors than it is for traditionally published authors.
That's true. If you know what you're doing. There's a couple of caveats.
Absolutely.
With what you just said. Because I only say that for authors listening. I don't want them to, I'm running into it and I've got, you know, superhero claim comes out.
Yeah, absolutely true. No, you have to approach it understanding that it's a business, you know, and I had enough years in the corporate world and training salespeople and messaging and all of that stuff that I felt confident that, you know, I could at least approach this in an intelligent way and treat it like a business. So.
Very cool.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, how you felt about, you know, especially being a person that looked into everything, how COVID, like, you know, overnight, everybody was an author and everybody was doing those things. And that's why I laughed when Erica said, because like, there were a lot of great books released, but then when you go and the typesetting and there's so many little things that I don't think people realize. So like, you know, you open a book and you're like, oh, this is going to be great. And all of a sudden it's like one page a word, or it's like the words are all messed up. And do you feel like since COVID happened that it's been harder for you to get the recognition you deserve as an independently published person?
I don't know about that, because I kind of established, you know, I had like an established reader base before, but I do feel like there are a lot of folks out there, you know, and this goes back to what Erica was saying, who just kind of run into independent publishing because they're like, oh, Amazon will just let whoever, you know, upload it and stuff like that. But they don't necessarily think about that you have to, you know, have an editor and format and do all of those things. I mean, I did all that research and I was pretty comfortable doing that. But I had also been in the corporate world producing training manuals for like a decade, where I was doing all the formatting and, you know, outlining and editing and writing and all of those things anyway. So I had experience to build on.
It's interesting. I've actually recently been asked probably a dozen times, which is so weird in the last 3 months, about Kindle Unlimited and people complaining about Kindle Unlimited. And I think a lot of it would be because you can publish anything you want to on Kindle Unlimited, and it's kind of a crapshoot. And I think a lot of people don't realize. I explained this to somebody the other day and they were like, what? I was like, if you publish on Kindle Unlimited, you can't publish that work anywhere else. It's the only on Kindle Unlimited. And they're like, well, I see stuff from some famous authors. I said, yeah.
Because their publishers have negotiated that.
Yeah, negotiated, but it's that particular story is not published anywhere else. Like, you won't find all of their work on Kindle Unlimited. It's sort of a tease to get you to buy their other stuff, which not a bad idea. Great idea. Go team, you know. Have more short stories up there. I think it's a great idea. But if more and more the quality has become such an issue over the years since people started doing it. And then I think we've had a resurgence of quality issues from everybody during COVID going, I'm gonna publish a book. And then
yeah. I mean, I think that's true. I also think with Kindle Unlimited, at least, I just kept seeing the per page payout go down and down.
You mean from the 1 cent it started off being or whatever?
Yeah,
down
like it was great to begin with.
12 zeros and then one.
Yeah. When I published the third book in my series, I took the whole series wide because I was just like, you know what? I've got 3 books in there now. And I would get people occasionally asking me about Kobo or Nook or whatever. And I'm like, let's just take it out there for everybody.
No, I'll say though, I am a huge advocate. I used to love Kindle Unlimited.
Yeah.
I do it all the time. That's where I get most of my, but that's what I do. I read one and then I buy their work. But that's one of the weird things is, coming from somebody who I have a publisher, like the steps you don't realize happen. And I think that's where everything has fallen through. And I think that's what's giving, people bad names, because it's kind of gotten weird the way that people react when, they're called indie authors now. Like before it was like self-published, and like they're trying to change it to get rid of it's almost like a derogatory term. It's like, oh, I am an indie author, and everybody's like, oh, or they ask you if you're self-published, and like it's like you're a lesser author almost, which doesn't make you put in so much work.
Around for so long. And it's one that I don't have time for. Like at this point in the industry and the way that things have been going in the last few years, I have no time for the kind of traditional publishing snobbery that you see that looks down on self-published authors. I mean, obviously because I'm one, but also I feel like I have read so many very high quality independent books from self-published authors, and I have read some garbage from publishers. And I feel like a lot of publishers are just chasing trends, and I just rather stay on my own path.
No, I think it's right. And I think for authors out there, finding ways to get your book published that are, you want somebody to go, oh, this is such a great book, and publish it, and you famous as J.K. Rowling, but it doesn't work like that. And another thing that I think that came up, and then we need to go back to talking all about you, but is that I think now, if we actually measured sales by what actually sold and not by, where people are saying best-selling, New York Times, all that stuff, and you actually looked at sales, I really think there's a lot of self-published authors that would be in the top 20.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
But they just don't even, because of the way.
You're not allowed to qualify. Yeah, you're not even allowed to qualify.
Yeah. Well, and now you have people. Now you have Barnes and Noble, like last week or the week before, saying that they're only going to stock like the top 2% of of physical books. And I just, how infuriating is that for mid-list traditionally published authors, because there's no hope, of ever getting into Barnes and Noble. And I know I've talked to a lot of people who have had luck locally going to their local Barnes and Noble and saying, I'm a local author, can you stock my books and stuff? But I've tried that here and they're just not having it. So
here's the trick to that, by the way, and a lot of people don't know this because we went down the super highway as a publisher, and I give this advice out, and it's something we're putting together for our authors too, just as a packet. 2 things. So Barnes and Noble needs 2 things available in order for them to actually order the books as a corporate policy. It has to be 53%, right, profit for them on the book, and a lot of times it's 40 or whatever people put them in at, and it has to be returnable. So on Ingram Sparks, for instance, and they can order off of Ingram, right? But your book has to have a 53% margin and wholesale margin and be returnable. So one of the things you have to do is really look at where pricing needs to be, because I think a lot of independents and self-published authors price, but you should be pricing to what the industry is now, because that's how you get your book in, and it's an immediate reject. And then if your books do get in there, here's my advice: go in and sign every fucking one of them, because they cannot return.
They can't return it.
The problem that I have with that is twofold. One, that Ingram Sparks author compensation is so low that I had to make a choice at some point. Like the second time that they dropped it within a year or so, I had to make a choice and say, okay, do I either raise the price of my book, or do I sell them at a loss through Ingram just so that they can be returnable? And I hadn't had a lot of luck getting bookstores to stock it through Ingram, but I had luck getting them to do it on consignment. A lot of independent bookstores will work with authors on consignment. So I just told Ingram, I said, no, thanks. I'll just take care of it myself and do it through consignment, because I wanted to be able to give that savings to my customers. I wanted my paperback to be priced similarly to the traditionally published paperbacks of comparable, size. And I wasn't, willing to make my book $20 versus, $16.95 or whatever.
Yeah, no, and that's inherently the problem too for self-published authors, is they don't have the volume and are not at the level in order to do it, which sucks. But that's why the Barnes and Noble, and that's why you have to take the other route you can take for them, is the book talk route, which if your book is in the top on the book talk, they'll put it on their book talk table. So
but that's hard if you're not white.
So basically all you have to do is sell your soul, guys.
Yeah. Or just
no big deal.
Specific genres.
Yes. And that's the other thing, is the weird swing of things. Like, how do you guys all come up with the same fucking idea at the exact same time? Like the amount of, what's really big in because I stock books all the time. But so like the big thing in romance right now is stealing brides. So like basically I would go out somewhere, someone would literally jack me from beside my husband, which would be hilarious. But it would, and like the guy just gives up after a bit. It's like, oh, fuck it. She's been taken. She magically fell in love in 3 days. I'm like, this is not Disney, people. I don't know what kind of lives you live, but like, that's the huge thing right now. And there's been 10 different releases of that exact same storyline. Yeah. And I'm like,
well, because that's where that sort of trend chasing goes with publishers as well, I think, is this is
get them out so fast.
Well, they decided a year ago that that's what the trend is going to be.
Okay, see, that makes sense. Okay.
No, and then you have the reverse harem. You have all these different tropes that come and go and come and go. And a lot of the smart self-published authors jump on those tropes and throw out a book in a couple months and they're good to go, which is great. It's just, I'll tell you what's funny is in 2 years, you'll see traditional publishers putting out this trope. So all these self-published and these indie published, small publishers that can get the books out quicker are doing it now.
Yeah.
In 2 years.
For markets that traditional publishers don't even know are there. No. That's the other thing, is that I think, well, at least for my series, I feel like there is, and I think I said this last time I was on, there's an underserved market of adult women who like fantasy. And that's why YA fantasies are so popular, because a lot of that audience is adult women who can't find that in women's fiction or romance, and stuff like that. So that's, the lane that I'm sort of on, is sort of the convergence of women's fiction, romance, and fantasy kind of all rolled into one.
I think that's fantastic. We talked about that last time you were on, but I think more and more books are being written in an older view, meaning not 16-year-old or 17-year-old or like 16 to 20, but are being written at 35, 40, for both males and females to go, okay, well, we do want to read about somebody like us, that goes, let's be divorced and, are stolen at the altar, but to our third husband, and we killed the other two with a sword we got from I'm just making up stories now. That's what I'm going to
You got to keep building
Yeah.
on it. It has to keep getting more and more excessive.
Yes. Oh, that was some thunder. This is going to be a fun podcast.
Ooh.
Okay, so let's talk a little
That'd be
bit
so
about your
fun.
folklore. So your fantasy stories were based on what folklore to begin with?
Well, it starts with Arthurian legends. That's kind of the jumping off point. And I sort of asked the question of what would happen if the future part of Once and Future were now. And we're picking up with, so if we're talking about the return of Arthur, the Once and Future King, we're picking up with the generation before in the 1990s, which is when the books start. And what would happen if, you know, a modern woman of my generation had this kind of premonition, vision, message, prophecy, whatever, that told her, you know, you are going to be the mother of the second coming of King Arthur or whatever. And what that would do, how that would blow up a modern woman's life and kind of what that would do. And in the course of that, I, you know, in asking myself those questions, I was like, where is she from? What does she do? What's her background like? And that's where I ended up developing this sort of fictional town of Kettle Holler, North Carolina, which is in the mountains. And
I can see it from
near
here.
Boone. Yeah, I mean,
It's like I'm right there.
and you know, and what starts her down this road. And in the case of the series, she grew up in the mountains, but her grandmother was from Scotland, so she grew up speaking Gaelic in her home, and her grandmother sort of steeped her in those traditions and taught her a song that has stuck with her. And so she decides that she's, as part of her research for her doctoral dissertation, she's going to try to trace the origin of this song, which is called The River Maiden. That's the name of the first book. And in the course of sort of researching this song, she teams up with a folklorist from Scotland who's not too hard on the eyes. And they, you know, delve into a lot of history, a lot of folklore. And she also digs kind of deep into her own family history and some of her childhood trauma in dealing with her mother's mental illness and sort of growing up kind of an outcast in Appalachia. So
very cool. And if I recall correctly, you love to do research. You are one of those people that likes to go down the absolute rabbit hole when it comes to research.
Yes. And when I decided that they spoke Gaelic in this book, I literally took Gaelic classes for years. And I'm sorely out of practice, but I'm the only author I know who went and learned a language because my characters spoke it.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a bit much right there.
Yeah, that might be a bit much, but I've also read.
Tolkien invented like 3 languages for his. So
that's true.
You're right up there.
Yeah, I fortunately did not invent this, thank goodness. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I did, however, of course, invent like the whole mythos of this family, but I minored in folklore in college, so I had this kind of background of knowing what these motifs and conventions are. So the stuff that I invented follows kind of some of the similar motifs to the things that exist. So it blends in kind of nicely. And at least I hope it does. It seems to.
Very cool. And you have 3 books out in that particular series now?
4. I'm working on the 5th.
And how many books are in this series, or is it just going to keep going till you stop? Because
Probably
I'm feeling you've outlined quite a few of them. So how many you have to go? Yeah.
Most likely 9. And I do have like beat sheets written out for the rest of them because I'm nerdy like that. So it also makes foreshadowing a lot easier if you know where you're going. Yeah, so probably 9 in this series. And I'm working right now on a kind of women's fiction-y rom-com book that is probably going to be the start of another series.
Is that going to have folklore and stuff in it too?
Yes, but it'll be an entirely different kind of folklore. This one's going to be set in North Carolina and follow kind of stuff that's a little closer to my own family, which is from the Piedmont in North Carolina, and they were all mill workers and stuff like that. So it's set in a former mill town after the mill closed down, kind of thing.
That's very, very cool. That's exciting. Okay, we have to take a quick break, and we will be right back with Drinking with Authors.
Great.
Sample locally sourced, quality distilled spirits in the beautiful Columbia River Gorge. At Skunk Brothers Distillery, we're family owned, brewing small batch grain to bottle spirits, just like our grandfather did back in the Prohibition era. From handcrafted bourbons and moonshine to flavored blends and cordials infused with local fruit. Join us for a tasting tour and buy Skunk Brothers spirits straight from the source.
It's all in the family at Skunk Brothers Spirits, located in Stevenson, Washington.
Yeah. Oh, we're back. What? What about dogs? What?
I hope y'all don't hear my dog barking. He's outside and he tends to bark a lot.
I think microphones have gotten so much better about what they pick up these days. Because I remember having microphones where like you could hear if somebody farted 3 rooms over, like you could hear the fart. And now people are like, hey, I have an elephant running through my living room. And I'm like, yeah, I can't hear that. Like it's
Yeah, my dog is banging his head off the door because I'm in one of our guest rooms and he can't get in. So he just keeps hitting the door like it's somehow gonna open.
Yeah, I'm in a shed in the backyard. So
she has a shed.
I do. Yeah.
What? See, and my husband says that would make me too spoiled. And yet if you saw my closet, you would say otherwise.
Yeah, no, I love this. Fortunately, luckily, we built it like right before COVID hit. So when my kids were on remote school and my husband was working from home and all of that stuff, I had this space to come out to and just separate myself. It's the only way that I finished the 4th book in the series because, I just couldn't do it while everybody was in there.
How long does it take you to write a book?
Too long. My readers will all tell you too long because I love cliffhangers. But yeah, I would love to be able to write a book in a year. I set a goal for myself in 2019 to write 2 in 1 year. And I drafted one and I wrote like 2/3 of one. And I was all, gung-ho to finish writing it in the beginning of 2020. And then the plague hit. And that slowed down quite a lot. And I'm just now kind of trying to get back to that kind of pace. And I'm close to finishing the first draft for the book 5 for the series. So, but it takes a while. I mean, I'm a mom and, we have lives and stuff. So it takes a minute.
No, I think anybody who's not a full-time writer, that's exactly what it does. Like you have to finish. That was a tree falling.
Oh my gosh. As long as you can get your house.
Nowhere near my house, but yeah, that was a tree falling.
Okay.
That's an interesting thing about living in North Carolina and probably in other areas. Like that's one thing my neighbor said. He's like, yeah, no, trees will just fall. And I'm like, oh, okay. And
yeah, it's true.
Apparently.
Yeah. We used to have it in the backyard all the time. When I lived in North Carolina, I was like, oh God, there's somebody's coming. There's a bear because I'm from New Hampshire. So when we first went to North Carolina, and that's exactly it. You don't know what the hell it is. I was like, there's a bear. My mom's like, there's not a fucking bear, Chelsea. Calm the hell down. It just branch fell off.
Yeah, this was more than a branch. I think when I go exploring out here in a little bit, that's going to be a full massive tree. I do have bears though too, so that's exciting.
Yeah.
So what is your little she shed like? How did you create your environment there?
Well, we had somebody. So I'm like I said, I'm in the backyard, and we had an existing shed here that we tore down because it was very old and moldy and just. And I talked to my husband and I was talking about spending money on like an office share kind of thing. And he was like, why should we go rent an office for you? We could just build one in the backyard. And so That's what we did. And we had a company come out and just build the shed right here in the yard. And then we came in and finished it. So we did like shiplap on the walls, and I have a blackboard behind me because I like to plot while I'm standing. And then bookshelves with research books and stuff like that. So it's very comfortable. It's like 10 by 12, and I've got an air conditioner that you can probably hear. And
no, that's how good the microphones are now. They don't hear it.
Yeah, and a heater for the wintertime and stuff. So it's great. And then our backyard was kind of just a big mud pit because we are surrounded by trees and couldn't really grow a lot of grass. So I sort of graveled over a lot of it and put in raised beds and stuff. So I have a nice garden between the house and the shed.
Oh, that's absolutely beautiful. That's fun and exciting.
Yeah, and there's a little patio out in front where I have a table and chairs, so I can, if I want to, I can just take my laptop outside and work out there.
Look how fancy. Don't you feel like she's a little more fancy that we're not?
Right. So basically what you're telling me is I need to go tell my husband really quick, I'm going to do an office share. Is that what that is? I'm just taking some notes. I'm just trying to figure out how to get this.
Yeah. I think it was going to be like $110 a month to just do an office share where you just like go and sit in a room with other people who have laptops and work. That's terrifying. Yeah.
Good deal.
So yeah, because I kind of missed that separation of going to an office. It's just a mental kind of shift from I'm not mom anymore. Now I'm the author. And it's, not home, it's business. And so that mental change really helps in at least getting you in the mindset to sit down and write or edit or, do whatever. So yeah, it was really helpful.
That's very, very cool. I think that's awesome. So you do ghostwriting too, don't you?
No, I do coaching.
Yes. That's okay. I was gonna find it. It's me and my gin. It's totally fine.
Well, now I had like a whole career before this where I was a corporate trainer and instructional designer. And I got very nerdy doing that about process improvement. Like my whole job was how can we work better, and then teaching people to work better and work smarter. And so I want to help writers do that because it's hard, especially if you have day jobs or families or kids or whatever. And so we all have to, and what works for me is not necessarily what works for other folks, but it's getting in that habit of looking at what your life is like and what you can do and trying to maximize what you're doing in the time that you have, and just work smarter, and think about your book as a process, as a product that you're producing, because we all are creative and we want it to be art, but at the same time we're producing a product that folks are going to consume. So we have to kind of think about it, at least after that first draft is done, you have to kind of think about it in a business-like way.
I think that's awesome, and helping people, because again, as much as you have the brilliant idea, I mean, it's also true with people who do paintings. Like I have several artists friends, and then I'm like, okay, are you going to get them in a gallery? Or are you going to the restaurants that put them on the wall? And they're like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And I'm like, okay, listen, nobody's going to show up in your garage and discover you. Just for the record, that's not how that works.
If they do, you should be worried. Like, how the hell did they know where you live?
Like, how did you get in my garage?
Exactly.
But yeah, I talk to a lot of aspiring authors who are just like, I want to write a book, or I have this idea, but I don't know what to do. And I can't get this idea that I have sort of out of my head and onto paper. And I want to help people do that, and do it in a way that if they want to be a professional is reproducible, so that, they can do it for the next book and the next book and the next book.
I think that's very, very cool. That's awesome, actually. So let's talk about when you began it all and decided to, I'm going to write a book. How many manuscripts did you go through before the first one existed?
I think that's a good question. I probably rotated through 3 or 4 different ideas before I settled on this one. But I don't know that they ever got past like the loose outline stage.
Okay.
Because I am a planner for sure. But this one kind of just came to me one day, and I wrote the first scene. And I do that for whenever I have a new idea, I'll write a test scene to just say, okay, do I have the voice? Is this worth pursuing? Is this something that I think could be a whole book, or is it a short story or a novella or whatever? And so I wrote that test scene, and I started doing that. And before I knew it, I had 50 pages. And I was like, okay, well, we're gonna stick with this then, and see where it goes. And then I set aside those 50 pages for like 12 years. And
We're on a roll. Let's take a massive break.
Yeah. Very, very long break. In which time, of course, I like moved and had 2 children, and did all kinds of other things, and had a career and stuff like that. And then when I was finally ready to get back to it, I got laid off from my corporate job, and was like, what am I going to do? And I was at home with a 2-year-old and nobody to talk to. So I started talking to my imaginary friends again, and decided to turn that into a book and figure out, like, I didn't know it was going to be 9 books at the time, but I at least knew it was going to be more than 1. So I kind of plotted out like 3 or 4, I think. And it snowballed from there.
So you of course published pre-pandemic. I love that we get to have that conversation. Like, you were published before. What were your first events like when you first got to meet people with your book in hand? What was that?
Fortunately, I had a pretty good reader base. I got very lucky when I launched the first book. I had been part of a number of kind of reader groups and fan groups for other authors. Like it was in some Outlander fan groups, and Discovery of Witches fan groups, and some other friends who are fans of Susanna Kearsley. And there are some similarities, I think, with all of those and the books that I write. So it was a lot of, hey, we like the same kind of books, maybe you'll like mine. And so a lot of people did. And I think the first signing that I had was at a local coffee shop here in Fredericksburg, where I live. And the owner was like, you have to tell me what your marketing strategy is, because I had like 20 or 30 people show up. And that was just fantastic, because we all kind of knew each other from those other groups. And they've just been really supportive. And even still, a lot of those readers have been patient enough to wait for the next book when it takes me, a year or 2 to write it. And then a lot of them are the ones, at least that are local, will come out when I have signings to various places, or if I do book festivals, they'll show up there and stuff like that. So it's really, really wonderful to have a kind of core group of supportive fans.
So what was that like, signing your book the first time?
Amazing. I mean, just absolutely amazing. Like, it was, it's one of those things, it's just a magical feeling, because I lived with these characters for so long, right? Even the 12 years that these, 50 pages sat on my hard drive, I still like had those characters in my mind. Dermot and Sarah are with me all the time. And so for other people to embrace them and buy into their love story is just amazing.
Very cool. So what, tell us a weird fan interaction.
I think last time I told you guys about the one where the woman got me at the Outlander premiere and told me about her dream that that my characters were going to France, which again, in the beginning of book 5, they are. Some of them are. But gosh, I don't know. I've had, you know, a number of people just in weird places or online just be like, oh yeah, I love your book. Or you know, or the first time that somebody who I didn't know from one of those other, you know, groups, somebody who I just never met before, came up to me and said like, oh, I came to this signing just for you, you know, or something like that. I mean, that's, you know, that's just magical.
Yeah. No, I think so too. And so you put out book 1. Let's talk about book 2 for a minute, because there was a little gap, right? If I recall correctly.
It's a couple of years. I wrote book 2 kind of weaves, it's kind of got a dual timeline going on. So it's weaving together Sarah's story with her mother's backstory. And so I sat down. The only time I've ever pantsed any part of my books was Molly's, that's Sarah's mother, her story that comes out in Cauldron. And I did it as my NaNoWriMo project. And I kind of, as soon as I got her voice, and there was one particular folk song that kind of was unlocked it all. And so that song kind of gave me her voice. And as soon as I started telling that, it just snowballed. And what I thought was going to be like a few scenes ended up being like half the book. And I decided after writing all of that, I was like, I'm not going to fit everything I want in this book. Like, there's no way I can tell all of Molly's story and fit the rest of this stuff. So I decided to split it up into 2 books. And so I had the first one where I'm telling I have Molly's story, and it's woven in with Sarah kind of making a big important decision about her life. And then the next book follows with the result of Sarah's decision. But yeah, that one was unplanned, and it took longer than I would have liked. But Cauldron is a great one. The editor that I worked with on the early books in the series, when he said, I think you've written a better book than the first one, I was like, okay, now I feel good about making that choice.
And that's, I think, what we all need to strive for, is like every book after the last book is better than the book, you know.
Yes. Yeah, we always want to think that. And I feel like I'm doing that. You know, I think book 4 ends in a way that some of my readers weren't happy about, but it's, you know, but because I know that there are 2 more books at least in that part of the story, I know that there's time to get folks the resolution that will satisfy.
How much does reader feedback to you play into any things you change or don't change on the story?
I won't say it doesn't play any role. I mean, I'd love to just say, you know, these characters tell me their story and I just write it down, but that's not entirely how it works. Okay. And I do sometimes get feedback from readers and kind of steer the story a certain. So I like to surprise people. And so if I hear readers theorizing one thing, I might just shift in another direction, or if readers tell me, you know, I would like to hear this character's perspective and things like that, I might think about it.
Do you do any little novellas? Because that's one thing I know a lot of authors do. See art on them and stuff. Little novellas off of the series to give some of these little characters that people are like, I'm so in love with Bob, and you're like,
yeah, I do actually. I usually use them as newsletter exclusives, but once I have enough, I'm gonna kind of put them together in like an anthology for and paperback and ebook so that folks can read them. But I have a few short stories that are already up, but the rest are newsletter exclusives. And I'll take like a secondary character and be like, where's part of this story that's not essential to the main series. So if you don't read them, it's not the end of the world. But if you do, it's just going to make everything richer. And yeah, I do that. And one of them, I have two characters. The most recent short story that I did after book 4 released, I have two characters who are two of my favorites. Like they are, one of them is from a previous generation, and he's just a sweet, sweet, sweet man. And then another is a character that doesn't show up in my book series until the 3rd book, but he's one of those characters that every time he shows up, I just smile. Like I can't help myself. I just love this guy so much. And so after book 4 came out, I released a short story where those two met and stuff. And it was a really kind of, they're both grieving at the time, so it was really kind of sad and heartwarming and stuff, but they're wonderful characters. And I mean, sometimes I just love some of these secondary characters so much. And the new series, the one that's sort of women's fiction-y rom-com, that is sort of a spinoff from the fantasy series, because it takes a secondary character from that we meet in the 1st book who needs some redemption, and it's kind of her redemption story. So
that's really awesome. What about conventions and stuff like that? Have you done like nerd conventions?
I have not. I've done like group signings with like romance authors and stuff, and that's you know, I mean, and that fits a little bit, but not quite. I have not done any, and I would love to. I've thought about RavenCon, which is one that we have here in Virginia. And I would love to do Dragon Con, but I just haven't gotten there yet. I've also looked into doing like Celtic festivals, because there's such a strong Scottish component in this series. I think that would be a great fit. And unfortunately, the big one that we have here in Virginia in Richmond is not happening this year. So, and my local independent author festival is also not happening this year. So I'm kind of bummed, because I love doing live events.
Why aren't they happening? Conventions are making a huge comeback this year. It's
Yeah.
like the year for conventions.
They seem to be, both of them actually seem to be venue issues. The one in the Celtic Festival in Richmond is used to be at the Richmond International Raceway. And I think they were having problems with the raceway. And then the one here in town is a park that is still under construction. And so because they're still, it was supposed to be in this park, and because they're still building the park, I think that they decided not to do it. The last time we did it, they actually blocked off the street in front of the park. But I think maybe the city doesn't want to do that again. So it's
Venues are an interesting thing, but I think it would be interesting to see what it would be like for you at a NerdCon.
I would love it. Like I said, I love doing live events. In my previous career, I did a lot of trade shows. And so I'm used to that kind of long day on your feet talking to folks and stuff like that. But I love meeting fans and readers in person. And so it's a lot of fun.
Very cool. And then something we didn't touch on was in this podcast, we did on the other one, but you are part of the Author Talk Network.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Author Talk Network is a group of authors. There are about 19 of us. And it was organized originally by Grace Salmon, who is just kind of a dynamo. She just, Grace gets an idea and she's going to run with it. And we all just kind of network around about who's been on podcasts and what podcasts are good and stuff like that. And we also do panels and things like that at different virtual conferences. And it's a lot of fun. I love talking about craft. I love talking about publishing. I love, all of this stuff. And writing can be a lonely business. So if you can team up with folks and share ideas, then, it's a great way to go.
And I think that's what we have to do is share ideas, create the community, find your tribe. Author Talk Network does a ton of education across the board. Aren't you guys, you have a new book being published or is published?
Yes, we did. We worked with Red Penguin Press to publish it's just sort of a quick guide for folks who are getting started on their author journey. And it's like tips for authors as they're writing their books. So it's tips from a lot of successful authors.
Yeah, that is really cool. Okay, as we're about to wrap up, what is one piece of advice? I've been asked this for a long time on the show, but you're a coach and mentor and stuff, so I get to ask this. What is one piece of advice you would give somebody who's like, I'm gonna write a book? Like, what is the key piece you want them to begin with?
The key thing for me is to make a plan. And I know I said I'm a plotter and I am a detailed plotter, but that's not what I mean when I say make a plan, because I know that everybody works differently, but you need to, at least before you get too deep into that writing process, you need to sit down and make a plan and say, what genres is this touching? How am I going to market it? Is there a market for it? And is it a good idea? And I say that because there are plenty of authors out there who have ideas that are in the end kind of end up being super problematic. Like if I, as a, white lady of European descent, decided I was going to write a book about Native Americans, it would probably not be a great idea. But there are plenty of other stories to tell. And so I think we have to kind of, before we get too deep into any idea, kind of need to analyze that stuff and at least make a high level view of, if I'm going to publish this, this is how I'm going to do it. This is where I think the market is, and where the audience is for this book.
Very, very cool. Okay, shameless self-promotion time. How do people find you?
I am at meredithstoddard.com, and that's Meredith, MEREDITH, just like the college, Stoddard.com. And I am also on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok and Facebook, of course. And I'm MR Stoddard on most of those places. And of course, you can also find me on Bookish Road Trip. I am the sort of communications director for Bookish Road Trip, which is an online community of authors and readers and travelers, and we love talking about books and travel, stuff like that. I host a monthly interview program there called Author Ride Along. So.
Very cool. Very, very cool. You're not busy at all. Very awesome.
Sounded like a lot of free time.
A lot of free time available to write many books this year.
Yes.
That was your fans speaking through me. They were channeling.
Yes. every time I put out like a teaser for any of the books that are out, people are like, when's the next book coming? It's coming.
No, that we can never feed the readers enough. There's no amount of writing we can do to feed the readers. That's why you have to create a community and have people who write books similar to you, so everybody can have like a communal potluck of.
Yes, I have like a further reading list on I have 3 on my website. One is fiction that is similar. One is about history and folklore, and one is about like Scotland and Scottish history.
That's very, very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast with us.
Lovely talking to you both.
Awesome. Okay, guys, this has been Drinking with Authors. I've been your host, Erica Lance. Our sponsor today is Skunk Brothers Spirits. DWA10 is the coupon code. Don't forget to like and subscribe, like right now as you're listening to us. Hit the button, because apparently we don't do that sort of thing later, ever.
Here?
And you can, I'm not sure
Is it up here? Is it down?
It's somewhere in a general direction on this screen or on your podcast app. And don't forget to leave us a review now that you've been drinking along with us, because drunk reviews are probably the best thing in the entire world. So we heavily encourage that. My co-host has been C.R. Rice, and our amazing guest has been Meredith Stoddard. And we will see you guys next time.